This podcast is brought to you by Free Buddhist Audio, the Dharma for your life. Our work is funded entirely by donations from our generous listeners. If you would like to help us keep this free, make a contribution at freebuddhistaudio.com/donate. Thank you, and happy listening.
So I'm going to start with just a little vignette. It's funny, isn't it? Memory is a mysterious thing. So I've got a very striking memory about this, but when I try and work out when and where it was, it all goes hazy and it sort of doesn't add up. But anyway, so there was the key element was I was talking with a good friend from my time before I started practicing the Dharma. So we've been friends since I was 16 years old, and we were in our early 20s at this point, kind of like 22, 23. And basically, he was getting going on that well-known trend of it's all downhill from here. Yeah? So it's like, okay, we're 22, 23, the best years are gone. Yeah, the most fun, the most intoxication, the most irresponsible sex, all of that is behind us. It's all downhill from here. And I was like a couple of years into practicing the Dharma, and I was just like, oh, dude, I'm really not sure it's like that, actually. Like, when I look back on my teens and early 20s, it was what looms most forward in my mind is emotional mess, physical mess, kind of psychic mess, yeah, like mess wherever you want to look. And at this point, I'd started coming to Padmaloka, and what strongly came into my mind was the experience of meeting Surata, who's told me to not lay this on too thick. So at this point, Surata was, we'll shift into embarrassment. So Surata's about 30 years older than me, I think. So I was in my early 20s, and Surata was somewhere in his early 50s, which of course, when you're in your early 20s, 50 seems ancient, doesn't it? It's like, that's the same age as my parents. And yeah, when here was my friend kind of giving it all this, the best years are behind us. What just quite naturally came into my mind was Surata, and I thought, now that is a man who I would be proud to be like when I was his age. You know, the qualities of, it's like his life isn't worse now. His life is expanded, is open, is connected, is meaningful, and actually, that's what I want. So we zoom forward 20 years. Just the other week, I was having a Zoom call with this same friend who I haven't seen, through the pandemic, and it was a different verse of the same song. Yeah. So here we are in our early mid-40s, and he's successful. He's got money. He's bought a nice flat in London. So he's got like all of that, but. The tune was the same tune. It was like, oh man, this isn't quite working, and I wish I didn't have a job which kind of compromised my core values. Actually, he's a very kind of honourable man. I'm not knocking him at all. He's a good friend, but he's kind of like he's trapped in the race. He's trapped in the game, and he's saying, oh man, like this is not great, and this is like I've got another 20 years of this. Man, that sucks. And again, quite naturally, what came to mind was Surata. Surata now 20 years on as well, Surata in his early 70s. And aging is not easy, yet still when I look at Surata, I look at a man and I think, no, when I'm 70, I'd like to be like him. There's a dignity, a confidence, an ease, a groundedness, and a humility. And I think actually it doesn't have to get worse. It doesn't have to get worse. So why am I telling you that story? Part of my job this morning is to connect this theme of the Stupa and energy. And in a way, Padmavajra did a bit of this yesterday, but I suppose particularly the mission of Tantric Buddhism particularly is to say, okay, so we've got the Buddha over there, we've got these ideals over there, how do we bring them inside? How do we make them our lived experience? So that's what I'm going to endeavour to do for you this morning, to bring it kind of home more. So as I was thinking about, so you've got this image of the stupa, this stupa, they erect stupas over, it's a memorial, it's what we do when people die to kind of commemorate and celebrate their lives. So there's a strong death message there, but as I say, Tantric Buddhism is preoccupied with life. And this little quote came to my mind. I had to go and ask Padmaloka where it came from. And it goes something like, make yourself into a shrine room. Make yourself into a shrine room. It's Buddha Ghosha, the great systematizer of the Theravadan Buddhist tradition, and he's talking about a particular meditation practice. He's talking about the meditation practice of bringing to mind the Buddha or Bodhisattvas. So this whole kind of rich realm of ritual, say that 3 times fast, that we've been entering into. And Buddha Ghosha is saying, if you do that, if you enter into this realm of ritual, of imagination, of illumined imagination, that was the term Maitri and I used yesterday, you will make yourself into a shrine room. And I would like to humbly suggest that Surata is doing a good job of doing that. Yeah. And we can all do a good job of doing that. So when I think about this image of making yourself into a shrine room, of course, one of the things which emerges is like the contemporary twist on that, just to pause for a second, which is, my body is a temple. You know that one? That whole kind of like pseudo-spiritual individualism. So what... I was hoping you'd laugh more when I said that, but there you go. I thought that was quite funny, but anyway. How is make yourself a shrine room different to my body is a temple? And in a way, this is the kind of the core thread which runs through the whole of the Buddhist project. This is what makes Buddhism Buddhism, as opposed to like a lot of what I'm going to say is sort of just sensible common sense, like the realm of psychology and neuroscience and self-development. It can say a lot of the things I'm going to say, but what makes Buddhism distinctive is this observation that actually my body is a temple. It's self-referential. It can border on narcissistic. It's all about me. Whereas make yourself a shrine room, you're doing that for other people. Yeah, so that's, and again, it's like, kind of intelligent therapeutic models and all of that. They would recognise the need for altruism as well, of course, because it's an eternal truth, it's an essential truth. But Buddhism places particular emphasis on that, and particularly, and I'll see how I do with this, it tries to draw out the fact that actually the core Buddhist part of the Buddhist project is the recognition that altruism works because what we're trying to do is we're trying to soften and liberate the energy, soften the self-preoccupation and let that energy flow out more fully. So Shantideva, famously in the Bodhicharyavatara, says, it is only by chance that you identify with this body. You identify with this blood, with this body, these bones. You do that because that's your habit to do that. You can change that habit. You can change that habit. You can make it your habit to identify with all that lives. Yeah? That's the Buddhist project. That's what we're embarked on for our own benefit. Because actually, the more we do that, the more energy is liberated, the more free and fulfilling our lives are. So, you'll remember that yesterday Padmaloka made a reference to this kind of essential Sangharakshita teaching. You could argue the core Sangharakshita teaching, one of them, and that is the need to find emotional equivalents for our intellectual understandings, energetic equivalents for our intellectual understandings. So that's what I'm really going to try and bring to the forefront for us this morning. What does that look like? How do we do that? So just remember as I'm talking, this is the core project of the Buddhist life. Okay, we've got these nice ideas. How do we make it real? So with that kind of reminded on, let's embark on a journey into the stupa, through the stupa, becoming the stupa. So those of us in the room, yesterday we did the stupa visualization practice where we visualized and Padmaloka was talking about it yesterday as well. So we visualised this yellow, golden, solid cube. This bright, white, luminous, radiant sphere. This scintillating, alive, vigorous red cone. This kind of mysterious, enigmatic, flighty, pale green crescent. And then the mysterious, rainbow-coloured, in some of the descriptions, radiating rainbows across all of space, flaming drop. So this is the stupa. So Bhante, in his evocation of the stupa, so I'm going to talk now about it kind of energetically, experientially. So one of the ways he talks about it, which is him taking a traditional teaching and kind of making it a bit more accessible and a bit more relevant. He talks about, so he says, so what's our energy like? What's our experience like? So he says, okay, the earth is like, it's the most familiar thing. It's like, it's habitual. It's like this, going for our days. It's just for shape and the habit and the rut of our lives. And Sankaracharya can be pretty pokey. So his suggestion is that almost all of our energy and almost all of our life is spent in this sort of like blocked, stuck, habitual, boring, energetic state. Yeah, this is just samsara, this is just normal. So then he goes on to describe the white sphere, and he says this is sort of, there's a bit of life, there's a bit of movement. Actually, probably we spend most of our lives in this sphere. This is what we're aware of. And here it's like, many of you will be familiar with this kind of core Buddhist teaching, this core kind of Triratna teaching of the wheel, the cycle, and particularly in opposition to the gap. So it's like this age-old thing where you do this, then they do that, then you do this, then they do that, and it all just goes round and round in circles, and it's really, really boring. So it's like, whatever it is, this is the world of our habitual experience. It's compulsion, it's that cyclical argument, discussion you have with your parents or your partner or your kids or your boss at work, where you kind of, it's like, I say this, and then you say that, and then I say this, then you get a bit upset, and then I have to apologise, and then you say, you should know that you don't need to say that, It's just really, really boring, it's really, really habitual. So then he says, so Sankaracharya is saying, like, basically this is where we live our lives, this is the tenor and the flavour of our experience. So then he talks about, let's just back up for a second, so he's got images for all of these as well. So his image of for Earth is just to be constricted, to be contained, to be cocooned, to be trapped. Sure, we all have experiences of knowing what that's like, very vivid experience of that. And then he says, okay, so then you've got, when you're in water, it's like your trappedness. Now you're in a cell, but it's a small cell. So he's saying, you can walk up and down, you can walk as far as you like, as long as it's within a 2 metre square radius. Yeah. So this is this kind of a habituation of our lives, isn't it? Some of those, it's very, very striking imagery, isn't it? I'm sure you've reflected on this yourself. Sometimes it's like, what would I do if I was free? And the answer is, stay inside. There's that traditional question, isn't it, where the prisoner is trapped for years and years, decades and decades. Someone comes along, opens the cage and says, "You're free!" And they put their head outside, they're like, "Oh, this is scary and overwhelming, close the door, let's just stay inside, let's just stay safe." So we're all familiar with this, aren't we, from our emotional lives. We know this experience. So the cone, the fire, this red cone, Sankaracharya equates this with these moments of inspiration, these moments of uplift, these moments of expansion. Something new emerges into our experience. We move, we're uplifted. Poetry, music, beautiful experiences of nature, those exciting and liberating first few moments, maybe weeks, maybe months, if you're lucky, years of an intense emotional relationship. Maybe coming on retreats like that. Maybe this weekend you're experiencing this movement and upsurge of energy and aliveness. That's really worth celebrating. Yeah, kind of recognizing and appreciating, valuing the experience. So so the next image, air. Air is with the image. So you've got the trapped person completely contained. You've got the person stuck in the prison. So for fire, it's like somebody comes and cuts a hole in the roof, and you fly out of the roof. You fly up. So once we reach air, we reach expansion. We reach. Like in Sangharakshita's evocation of this, he's talking about magic. He's talking about the radical transformation of consciousness where weird things start happening, and in fact they happen all the time, and in fact they're happening because you're doing it. Yeah, so you've all, probably most of us have had like these little glimpses of this, haven't you, where just it's like, that's a bit weird, how did that just happen? I've had it with dear old Maitrinara this weekend. It's like, it feels like almost every time I'm sitting in that lounge and I think, where's Maitrinara? And just that moment he walks in, often when I want to talk to him about something, I'm like, that's weird. It's like, it's kind of, we're having a nice like little tuned in phase. It's good. But you know those moments, those real moments of like radical expansion. And yeah, so Sangharakshita describes this as, the energy has stopped going up, it's now expanding, it's everywhere at once. And finally, the flaming, iridescent, mysterious rainbow drop. So this is awakening, this is the total transformation and liberation of consciousness. This is what we're trying to do. That was air. Now, air was the expansion. Yeah. Thank you. So this is the stupa, this is the journey that we're invited to go on. So I don't know about you, but if you remember, about 10 minutes ago I said this was the practical talk, and I've just described in 5 steps the movement from where you are right now to total and complete awakening. That doesn't seem like a particularly graded or nuanced model, does it? Is anybody else thinking that? So, because that's what I'm thinking. So let's just kind of dive into that for a moment, yeah. So what's the problem, yeah? So I'd like to suggest there's 2, maybe 3 problems, and that's before we get all the way. So the primary problem is that any model. Well, Padmaloka said this yesterday, didn't he? He said so. One of the core problems of Buddhism is that you're looking forward, and there's perfection in front of you, and it's really easy to feel demoralised, to feel overwhelmed, to feel that is not possible, that is not reasonable. So we need to do something about that. So I'm going to spend the rest of my time talking about what we do about that. If you're thinking, oh man, you're doing my head in, hopefully I'll stop doing your head in. So what's the problem? So the problem is, and particularly I suppose I want to dwell on, so we've got this experience of constriction, we've got this experience of like some degree of freedom, but it's like very, very habitual, and then we've got this experience of uplift, this experience of inspiration. True Ratna places great emphasis and importance on the experience of inspiration. Maybe that was a significant part of your experience of listening to Padmaloka yesterday. He's, in a way, he's famous for that capacity to rouse and inspire our energies. Really, really important, totally essential. You've got to have a sense of possibility of where you're going. But let's just kind of dwell into some of the challenges with that experience. And I'd suggest there's 2 primary challenges. So these are intended to be funny, just to kind of give you a kind of heads up. So problem number 1 is the most acute problem, which is the crash. Yeah. So we're going to say a bit more about this later on. So I remember years ago talking to a dear friend about his time going to Padmaloka, and we were talking about what happened on the way home. Yeah. So he was halfway down, we just lived in Colchester, so it's like 2 hours down the road, halfway down the A12 on his own in his car. He pulled in for petrol, and he just felt, so he was uplifted, he was radiant, he was excited, he was energized. And then another part of his being was like, whoa, it's too much, it's too bright, I can't bear it, I can't hold this experience. So he filled up the petrol, walked into the petrol station, and he bought cigarettes, chocolate, booze, and porn. And he found himself in the toilet cubicle with all of those. It's like, It's like, you've only got 2 arms. It's like, how are you... Like, that's for crash, yeah? So let's all hope, so here, in terms of realistic expectations, so if on your way home you don't do that, then that's a step towards success, isn't it? Like, let's aim a little bit higher than that, but that's for crash, yeah? So what's happening there, it's like we have this experience of uplift and expansion, and our psyches, it's too much, we can't bear it. We want to go back to what's safe. We want to go back to what's familiar. It's understandable, but a major part of your Buddhist journey, of a journey through life, is learning how to let those moments of uplift inspire you without either holding on to them, because that will be painful, or pushing them away because they're overwhelming. That's a major part of the journey. I'm not necessarily going to tell you how to do that. I don't think anyone can tell you how to do that, but it's really good to be clear that that's a key thing to learn. So the other one is more subtle, but in a sense it's more pernicious. So this is the bypass, kind of spiritual bypassing. So it's a term which can get overused, but it's definitely got something really useful to say. And this is where you've lifted up, and you sort of forget about for what's below you. You forget about the normal world, and you're like, oh, I'm so spiritual. I can and you'll get egg on your face pretty quickly. So I just had a very small experience of this yesterday. I was sitting in the library of Maitranara yesterday afternoon, having this really kind of lovely conversation about how the retreat was going and what we were going to do and how the evening was going to go. And I was just like, I just felt really expanded. I just felt really good. I felt happy. My mind was clear. I was at peace. So I left Maitranara, and there was probably, although I didn't notice it at the time, there was probably a certain level of kind of self-satisfied, oh, look at me, aren't I doing a good job of helping run this retreat, and da-da-da-da. So I walk out of the library and walk down there. I'm just going to the loo, and I open the door, and I break my nail, and I've got no idea how I did it. I just banged my hand into the door somehow. And it's like, it hurts. And it's like I was just opening a door. Like, how many doors have I opened in my life? Like, hundreds of thousands, and here I am thinking, oh, I'm so spiritual, I'm so aware, I'm so in tune, and I just muck up opening a door. It's like, that's just a little example of bypass, isn't it? Do you see what I mean? Like, it's like, it can get a lot more messy than that, I tell you, but it's just this when you're elevated, and you forget to keep your feet on the ground. You forget to spatially locate where the door handle is. So crash and bypass, yeah, things to watch out for. So, and what I was just talking about was this model of the stupa, the awakening of our energy. Sangharakshita says this is a crucial thing we need to do within our spiritual lives. And he's got this model of awakening of energy, which is 1 to 5, where 5 is awakening. So we need to get a bit more granular about that. We need to kind of break that down a bit. I would suggest, I certainly do. So I'm going to talk about each of the elements in a more, well, in a way, it's because there's also this. Just backing up a tiny bit, there's also this image of refinement, isn't it? So earth is most kind of unrefined, and you're moving up the process of refinement. That's a really, really useful model, but there is, in a way, as with all teachings, the problem of a linear path is it can really easily give rise to this experience of crash and bypass or kind of confusion, because it's like you think that you're here, but then you've got to do something here. So I'm going to shift into a different model. I'm going to shift into the model of a mandala. Yeah, so rather than it being earth, water, fire, air, space, we're going to shift around. So now we've got space at the centre, and we've got a mandala, and we've got these kind of 4 quadrants. So you've got earth, water, fire and air, like this. So they're all equal, So Buddhism isn't pseudo-egalitarian. It definitely does say that there's somewhere to go, but there is also important values to be drawn from this project of seeing things more equally as well. Can hold both at the same time. So we've got So just to kind of go around the mandala again, and I'll go around it quite quickly, and then we'll come back and talk about how you can work in different areas. And it's worth saying at this point that inevitably I'm going to talk quite personally, and some of what you need to do is you need to be translating the examples into your experience. Hopefully they'll resonate, at least for some of you, at least to a certain degree. But it's really important whenever anybody's doing something like this, it's like, this is an example of how to approach practice. I'm not saying this is how you approach practice. Yeah, that's really important to remember. So we've got earth. So earth in this kind of re-rendering or kind of the model. Earth is what is basic, what is immediate. So it's the energy, right? Remember, we're talking about energy. So I'm not using earth as a metaphor. So it's the energy of sex, of money, of work. Yeah. So it's like these physical things of skill, the ability to build things, the ability to do things. Yeah. Then we've got water, and water is the kind of like the interior experience of emotionality, and in a sense, and consequently, and this is where the whole model gets interesting immediately, because that's the arena of relationships. So it's like sex and relationships are definitely different. So this is like like intimacy, relationships, that kind of like mysterious, fluid world of feelings, all of that kind of stuff. Then we've got fire. So fire is the realm of ideas, the realm of inspiration, the realm of ideologies. You all know that experience, don't you, when you're sitting at the dinner table or you're watching YouTube, you're like, rah, 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 and another thing, you should think like this, you should think like that. So it's that really telling people how it is. So it's the realm of academia. All of that energy, really, really intoxicating. That's a funny thing about fire, isn't it? It's fire. Fire brings heat. Fire brings life. Fire burns. Yeah. So we've all seen that, haven't we? We've all been burnt by other people's ideas and opinions. We've all burnt other people with our ideas and our opinions. Yeah. Then we've got the realm of air. So air is the realm of communication, of connection. It's like air moves, it flows between us. It's that which unites us. As I say, this isn't like a systematic model. It's an evocation of experience. You can play with it and you can think, oh, that doesn't quite fit, does it? Actually, Dharmashalin, your air thing there didn't quite work. That's fine. It doesn't have to all work. It's evoking something. Air is Mercury, the messenger of the gods, he who goes between places. Yeah. The primary danger with air, of course, is superficiality. Airhead, space cadet. Yeah. I should know. That's me. It's interesting. So just to kind of pause for a second, as I've gone through these elements, probably each of you will have some kind of association with one more than others. It's like, oh yeah, I'm that kind of person. I think that's good. I think that's natural. One of the things I found interesting is I was kind of mapping out this whole schema, and like I'm an air person. I'm definitely not an earth person. I was like, oh yeah, so what's good about earth? Because I don't know, rubbish at it. And I was like, oh no, it's skill, isn't it? It's capacity. That's what's good about earth. Earth is reliable. I was like, oh yeah, I was looking for my bit of paper for like several minutes thinking, oh, what's missing here? And it's like, oh yeah, there's something good about earth. It's not just like, animalistic sex and kind of like money. There's something good there too. Reliability, stability. Yeah. And then space as the kind of, space in this conception of the mandala. So space is, the awakened expansive quality which sees that holds the awareness of the experience of separation between us, but also helps us see that experience of separation isn't as real as we think it is. I've got an example of that, but it's a bit superficial, so I've just decided not to use it because I don't want to denigrate this image of expanded, connected awareness. So these are the realms. This is for like the experiential realm of our energies, and I'd like to suggest that in terms of practicing, in terms of growing, in terms of being a happy, healthy human being, I'd like to suggest there's 3 different things that we need to think about. So we need to look, first of all, we need to ask ourselves, where am I losing energy? Where am I hemorrhaging energy? If you imagine it's like your life is like a boat, where's the bloody great hole in the boat where you're trying to get somewhere and you're just like there's water pouring in? So that's question 1. Where are you losing energy? Question number 2 is, where can you direct energy more creatively to make what you're doing more satisfying, more significant, more meaningful? So just to kind of tell you what I mean by that for a second. So Sangharakshita, in his conversation about energy, this famous quote where he says you need to, I think it's somewhere else actually, where he says he's talking about this need to direct your energy, and he says, well, you need to go where the energy is. And his example is, so if you're not interested in meditation and what you're interested in football, then you have to go and just go and do football. And maybe Surita can tell us later kind of how this, in Sangharakshita's imagination, this experience of ascent. So you go from being into football, and that energy is refined and transformed into being into meditation. I really can't tell you how to do that, folks. Like, for a start, I don't give a monkeys about football, but in my own emotional equivalent, I cannot tell you how to do that. But what I think you can do is you can ask yourselves, well, how can, and in a way this is one of the main things I want to talk about, how can you take what you're doing anyway and dharmify it? How can you bring that into the process of awakening and transformation and satisfying life, rather than it just being neutral or irrelevant? Well, so, like, for example, Sangharakshita talking on this topic, he says, well, one of the most obvious things to do is do it with your friends. So if you're into football, play football with your Buddhist friends. Start a 5-a-side team. Like, at least watch matches together rather than watching them on your own. Just quite, So it's just really obvious, isn't it? It's really straightforward. It's really basic, like do it with other people. And finally, I'd like to really encourage us to celebrate where our energy is alive and in tune with our aspirations and in tune with our values. It's crucial. Celebrate what is good. And again, that's something, really tying back to something Padmaloka was saying yesterday. It's like, it's good to have a sense of the Buddha and your aspirations, but it's really good to be able to look backwards and say, oh, look, I've come from there. That's what celebration is, isn't it? It's like celebrating your good qualities. Being able to celebrate each other, like, Mike Chinara did a really lovely job of just, welcoming me, half an hour ago. It was really, hopefully, the reason we do that isn't kind of like give the person who's about to speak a big head. It's because it's good to celebrate. It activates energy, it activates a sense of what is possible. So losing energy, directing energy, celebration. So let's just dive into each of those a little bit. So losing energy, the main thing I want to say here is, there's 2 things. One of them is just recognising how much energy we lose through concealment, through shame, through embarrassment. So I don't know about you, but I certainly can think of there's been parts of my life where I felt embarrassed and kind of like, it's not great. Sometimes it's neutral, sometimes it's embarrassing, sometimes it's like, oh no, that's definitely unethical. You need to stop it, actually, for your own sake and the sake of people around you. So that we all know all of that, but actually don't underestimate the sort of like, for the tendency to kind of close down, to hide away, how much extra energy you're losing through that. So the most obvious example here is sex. So sex is, from a Buddhist perspective, sex is entirely neutral, as long as it's 2 consenting adults, whatever. But the amount of psychic energy that can be tied up with sex is approaching limitless. So we're a mixed age range in this grouping here. So for some of you younger guys, it'll be like, oh yeah, I'm completely obsessed with sex. Some of those amongst us who are older, it's like, I don't think about sex very often at all. And of course, it's not just age specific. So it's like, this is a good example of the example where you need to be thinking, well, so what's my equivalent if sex doesn't speak to you? So so like, stop it's not like you need to tell your friends in great detail about the nature of your sexual experience, but it's that may or may not be a good idea. But it's just like being, like not concealing so much, not hiding that world so much, being like, this is what I'm up to. Speaking personally, I think another thing that Padmaloka was talking about the other day when he was talking about the cube integration, which is really what we're exploring, he was talking about confidence. So I suppose, when I think of myself as a younger man, I noticed that I lost a lot of energy through lack of confidence. Actually, it's like I was really preoccupied by a couple of things: sex and like manliness, sort of being a man. And it was really, actually, like looking back on it, I was really hemorrhaging energy through that. Just kind of like feeling, it's like, I'm into this Buddhism thing, but it's like, should I go off and do that? Like it's just a huge waste of energy, frankly. But this is a thing, like that energy, it did need to be answered. Sex, it's interesting, isn't it? Sex is on the universal human rights. It's like it's one of its, like, the UN recognises it as it's a basic fundamental need of all human beings. Buddhism might want to explore that a little bit, but there's truth to that. So what I'm saying is bring intelligence and sensitivity to your experience of this realm and ask yourself, am I hemorrhaging energy? So for me personally, just to get really practical, I was just I didn't have a girlfriend. I hadn't had a girlfriend for years, and I just felt a real lack of confidence. It's all around kind of sexual identity and like, am I good in bed, and all of that really basic human male stuff. And no amount of practicing the Dharma was going to answer that question. There's just like a basic need to be like, to have a bit of confidence and self-esteem in that area. What I experienced, and this may or may not be your experience, was getting into a healthy, stable relationship just answered that question unbelievably quickly. So this is really the point here. Have you got kind of like thorny questions in your mind which go, no. Can you just find a way of answering them? Yeah. So for me, it's like preoccupied, like and like messy, like being an order member and not being in a relationship, because really messy. Because it's like, you're doing some class and it's like they're listening to you and you're like, oh, you're listening to me. That's like it's a nightmare, frankly. So actually, kind of getting into a relationship just like really settled my energy. I just felt much more confident and at peace. So that might not be your experience, but maybe it would be. Or maybe there's a parallel in another area of your life. So directing energy. So this is... So one of my favourite quotes, which I don't know where it comes from, is Jamyang Khyentse Rinpoche, one of Sangharakshita's key teachers, his root guru, and he's talking about his practice in life. And he says, I never break my monastic precepts, 216 or 264, ranging from total celibacy to like weird sort of ethic things about, like how you handle money. So it's like, like a big body of precepts, yeah? I never break my monastic precepts. I occasionally break my bodhisattva vows. Bodhisattva vows, I vow to liberate all sentient beings. I vow to master the whole of the Dharma path. I vow to, there's some pretty heavy stuff there. So he occasionally breaks those vows. And you're thinking, Dharmashalin, I thought you said this was practical. I break my tantric precepts like the drops of rain in a rain cloud, in a thunderstorm. So the tantric precepts, which I think are really, really interesting, really, really relevant for all of us, are the subtle moments of interaction that we have constantly in every moment of every day. These very, very, these subtle moments of, and it comes back to this whole business of self. Am I sort of solidifying and projecting and trying to make myself strong at your expense, or am I counteracting that tendency and actually recognising the connection between us and seeing through this experience of separation? So that's what the tantric precepts are about. And the reason this is practical is because you can do this all the time. If you're a dad, if you're an academic, if you're caring for your sick mum, you can be working on this level all the time. Yeah, it's hard, Nobody said it wasn't hard. What was that thing from the White Lotus Sutra last night? It's like, it's hard, but you can do it. So what does that look like in experience? So for me, one of the things I do is I play competitive Warhammer. So this is like a board game. Some of you will recognise it, with like little war figures. And I go to these tournaments with like hundreds of people, and I compete, and I want to win, yeah? Like I never win, because people who win dedicate their lives to this, and I do it in my spare time. But I've played some of the best players in the world. I didn't give them it wasn't a fair match. They just curb stomped me. But anyway, I've still played them. Why am I telling you that story? Because in that experience, I've got a question. So it's a very, very complicated game. And there's I'm playing you, and we both want to win, and whoever wins goes on to the next round. So it's not like I don't throw the game because I'm trying to experience my non-difference. That would be stupid. That would be a waste of time. But in it, I'm really, and this is a challenge, and this is a real practice, I'm really, really trying to think, okay, so where can I direct my energy creatively? So in this case, it's like this red cone of ideas and ideologies and kind of competition. In a way, it's true in all of them. So I really, really try to, just to play fair. It's pretty basic, isn't it? I try to be polite to the other person. I try not to get stroppy when I lose. It's basic, but actually this is practicing the Dharma, guys. This is what it looks like. You're doing this not only because it's the right thing to do, but because you've got a vision that actually I'm trying to soften this hard self-separatedness, and I'm trying to live a life of connection. And the one which I'm really trying to work on at the moment is I don't know if I'm going to evoke this properly for you. It's like this. It's a very complicated game, so it's really easy just to slightly get things wrong in your favour, because it's like you have to measure. It's like hundreds of dice, very, very precise measurements, and it's really easy just to slightly get it wrong in your favour. And it's like really, really trying to see that as a core move that we're doing all the time in all of our lives. It's like, oh look, I didn't see you there. Oh, that's the last piece of cake. Sorry, I didn't realise that you hadn't had any yet. All of these moments, it's like, no, I'm trying to see that, and I'm trying to counteract the tendency to be me and to say, okay, what about us? So I think that's really practicable. You remember yesterday, Padmaloka was talking about these lines from the Dhammapada, experiences led by mind, produced by mind, preceded by mind. If you speak or act with an impure mind, suffering follows like the cart follows the cart follows the ox that draws it. So this is making the Dharma real. It's bringing it into our lives. I say, okay, so really trying to take some of these teachings and think, okay, how can I make that be present in every moment of my experience? If you remember this image of the elements as a mandala, so you've got earth and fire, earth and water, and fire and air. So what unifies them is this seeing. Well, it's like this insight into actually. Sorry, I've just had an incoherence moment. So if you imagine we're trying to move into the centre of the mandala, not move out of it. So moving out of it is solidifying this I'm separate, I'm in this for me, it's me against you. It's like the conflict. That's what moving out of the mandala is, or moving to the edge of the mandala. What we're trying to do is we're trying to move into the mandala where we're seeing through this experience of separation because it brings bliss, because it brings joy, because life is better like that. And we all know that, don't we? We all know what it's like. It's crap being in conflict with people and falling out. It sucks. Again, back to Padmaloka, those who realise that we're heading to death compose their quarrels. So it's like just saying, oh no, this is what I'm trying to do with my life. And I feel like I've not done the best job of fully evoking these energies, but hopefully I've given you enough to think about. So just coming to the end. So we've had these three practices, so we can recognise where you're losing energy, where you're hemorrhaging energy, where it's just a big hole in the boat. Do something about it. The main part of our job is recognising how can I bring the Dharma into my everyday life, and that's this thing about using this, like I'm suggesting, using this subtle recognition of how am I solidifying my sense of separation and in opposition to you, or am I cultivating a sense of connection and non-difference between us? Yeah, but partly that's, like, I wonder, one of the reasons that's so important to me, of course, is, as Maichanara said earlier, I'm an air type, so my whole life is relationships. So it's like I'm just very, when I'm at my best, I'm very acutely aware of the way in which my energy manifests in relation to people. And it's like, there's a whole bunch of you that I want to, like, I've had these little moments over this weekend. It's like, I was just a bit like I did this a bit, or I did that a bit, and it's like, that wasn't quite great, was it? It wasn't bad, it wasn't terrible, but could have done better there. Some of you have already had little conversations. I just want to apologise. Where have you gone? Anyway, I just want to apologise to you for that. Like, it was a bit weird, wasn't it? Maybe it's different for you. Maybe, like if this is where as I say, you have to do an act of imagination, or you have to think, well, what does that look like for me? Like, if you're a real kind of earth type, where your primary realm of experience is something much more physical, then you need to ask yourself, okay, so how am I expressing my physicality? How am I expressing my skill in a way which either reinforces my separation or kind of helps soften it? It's the same job. You need to do the same thing, but you need to work out how you do that, because I'm crap at basically anything physical. The way I do that is just for humility, to constantly have to ask people to help me, because I'm crap at it. But anyway, to finish, one thing just kind of this, the third practice I talked about was the practice of celebrating energy, celebrating the good. So what this looks like, in a way, well, that's what Maichanara just did earlier. So it's like, like kind of recognising and celebrating the good qualities in yourself and in others. Yeah, so there's a whole talk which I don't have time to give here, about working with envy and jealousy and conceit and resentment. Such an incredibly worthwhile area to explore. Such a worthwhile area to explore. Just going to do a micro moment on it, like a tiny micro talk, because it's just so valuable. Because we're men, aren't we? So men naturally. We aspire, we want to do better, and when you're wanting to do better, you naturally look around and you think, who else is in this race, and where am I in relation to them? Yeah, like, get out of the way, much. No, I'm going to get ahead of you, mate. That's what human beings do, isn't it? I imagine women do it as well, maybe in a different way. Men certainly do that. So, I'm going to do this anyway. I've got a bit of time. So it's really. So this is where this image of the elements is really interesting. So we've got, what I'm painting here is these different spheres, these different domains. So it's particularly easy to kind of be like, well, I'm an earth person. So you epoxy, fire, emotional type, you're rubbish. It's like earth's where it's at. But so obviously I'm kind of caricaturing it, playing a bit. But it can be like that, can't it? And often what's happening there is, and the thing to really watch out for, is this is where you've got this imbalance. So you've got like this area where you're weak, and seeing somebody who's strong in that makes you feel bad. So therefore you invalidate the whole category of human experience, to say, well, that's a waste of time just because I'm not very good at it, rather than saying, oh, great, you're good at that. Maybe you could give me some tips, actually. Like, as I say, it's great in Birmingham, I'm getting my Mitra friends to help me do DIY and renovation stuff. It's a real lesson in humility, because I'm like, can you come and I say to them, can you come and help do some DIY? And then I change it to and say, no, actually, can you come and do the DIY and I'll pass you the tools? Because that's what it's like. It's what it's like. Yeah, it's true. Where am I going with this? So we've got this experience of energy. We've got this for a reason. This is important because Buddhism really encourages us to aspire, to grow, to go upwards. And therefore we need to find a way of being at peace with our own aspiration and to celebrate our friends as they're growing upwards, not get into conflict. I think this is such an incredibly powerful low-hanging fruit in Dharma practice, because it sucks to be envious and it's great to celebrate your mates. So it's like, can you see what I mean? It's like, you can just go from one to the other and your Dharma life will be much better. So I really encourage you to do that. But so just to say a tiny bit more about what that might look like, I had this really striking experience years ago. I went to a ballet with a kind of Buddhist group, and there was a bunch of little girls sitting behind us, kind of like, little ballet girls, and it was basic for ballet was anyway, I'm going to interpretation. Basically, they scrunched and munched crisps all the way through the whole thing. And what I found really interesting, I was with another friend who's much more kind of aesthetically refined and into high culture than me, and I could really see him kind of prickling under the kind of these kids making a noise, and this sort of like, darling, I'm here trying to have an aesthetic experience, and you small children are ruining it. Overplaying his response, of course. He didn't tell them off or anything. But what I found interesting was I immediately kind of jumped ship from aesthetic experience. It's like, well, I'm not going to win that race. I'm not going to be more aesthetic than him. So I jumped ship into like tolerance. And I was like, well, get you. I wasn't ordained at this point. Well, get you, Mr. High and Mighty Order member, being reactive about these kids. I'm just really tolerating and accepting of them. Therefore I'm better than you. Do you see what I mean? Like, none of that was said, but I could see that was going on. I certainly could feel it in my mind, and pretty sure it was going on in his mind as well. So that's a really good example of where, like, envy, you can kind of jump, and you're always looking for a way to win the game. And one of the ways of winning the game is invalidating the game the other guy's playing and saying, oh yeah, you're good at meditation. Meditation's bloody introverts, head up your bum. It's like, what it's really about is puja. It's like, wretched puja, load of mumbo jumbo nonsense. What it's really about is seeing clearly, so on and so on and so on. Yeah. So you just don't need to do that, guys. Just drop it. Just see it for what it is. Celebrate your friends. And there's something here, this is really, really important to me. I think it's so important to have a sense of celebrating and confidence and standing tall in our own good values. You've all got values, you've all got qualities. That's why we have our order names, because they're a real invitation to quality. To recognise, you've got potential in you, you've got this thing which is beautiful, and it doesn't need to be a zero-sum game. This is the point. We're so habituated to the realm of competition where it's like, it's either you're the most important person or I'm the most important person. There is no us. There's no runners-up. There's no second prize in the realm of most things in our lives. It's like the Dharma doesn't need to be like that. Actually, it's a relief from that. You can really aspire and grow and go for it, and you can really celebrate those around you. And that is a gift. And that, in a way, that is my, I don't know. I think it's just such a powerful way of activating energy. And so we've, as I say, I've somewhat wandered from this image of the stupa. Because it just feels like that's such. When I think of energy, I just always go back to that, because for me personally, I've just seen it as such a profoundly transformative practice, shifting from envy, jealousy, comparison, all of that into celebration. And it's a constant practice. You keep on doing it. It's not like it's done. So if you're thinking, Dharmashalin, what's your basis for saying all of this? I'm going to finish with a little story from the Buddha. So the Buddha's kind of sitting around with his mates, all the boys. This is going to be a retelling. It's Majjhima Nikaya 32, the Greater Discourse in Gosing if you want the more canonical version. So the Buddha's sitting around with all the guys, Ananda's there, and Mahakasyapa, and all of the gang. And the guys get into this conversation, and the conversation is, which kind of monk, which kind of practitioner is the best monk? It's a beautiful full moon evening. The moon is high in the sky, and they're like, so which is the best kind of monk? So here we are. They're all enlightened, and they're still doing comparison and competition. So give yourselves a break. And so they're asking each other. It's a bit like a game, isn't it? So they say. So Sariputra asks, I don't know, Mahakasyapa, and he says, Mahakasyapa, which is the best kind of monk? And Mahakasyapa says, it's the monk who's fully embodied earth, stable, upright, dependable, just like me. And Mahakasyapa says, hey, sorry, I should have written this down more. There's the psychic one. Hey, Moggallana, which is the best kind of monk? And Moggallana says, it's for one who's deeply in tune with their internal experience, who can feel the subtle movements of energy and knows himself completely and fully, who masters the water element, just like me. And they turn and say, Sariputra, which is the best kind of monk? And Sariputra says, it's the monk who is full of powerful, transformative speech, who can uplift the audience, who can rouse and direct energy, who has mastered the fire element, just like me. And then they look at Ananda and they say, Ananda, which is the best kind of monk? And Ananda says, if the best kind of a monk is the one who's completely in tune with the other people, sensitive to their needs, aware of everyone around, but one who's mastered the air element, just like me. So they do a few more. And then so they get to the end, they say, and the thing that's interesting here is they're not getting into like, oh, and therefore I'm better than you. They're just fully celebrating their own positive qualities. Yeah, there's no competition. Well, there might be competition, but there's no resentment, there's no envy. They're just really celebrating their own positive qualities. So of course they get around to like, let's go and ask the Buddha. So they go to the Buddha, and the Buddha, of course, as he always does, he says, so tell me the whole story, what's just happened? And they go round, and the Buddha, after each one, says, well, of course, Mahakassapa, you would think that the monk who masters the earth element is the best, because you are a master of that element. So the Buddha's really affirming, he's saying, yeah, you would say that, because you're like that. Moggallana, you have mastered the water element, So they say, so come on, Buddha, give it to us, which is the best kind of monk? And the Buddha says, well, the best kind of monk, can you guess? The best kind of a monk is the one who tries, the one who goes, the one who practices to transform his mind, his heart, and his body for the sake of himself and everyone. Because that is what makes you the master of earth and fire and water and air. That is what connects us. That is what is most important.
We hope you enjoyed this week's podcast. Please help us keep this free. Make a contribution at freebuddhistaudio.com/donate. And thank you.